Welcome to the latest episode of Rich Sports Talk. We have breaking news. The New York Jets have their defensive coordinator, what it means for Aaron Glenn's future, and of course, the Jets making headlines for all the wrong reasons. Welcome to our channel. Make sure to hit the like and subscribe button so you miss any of our latest content. Check us out wherever podcasts are available, and also check us out on social media using the handles at Rich Sports Talk. So the Jets have pivoted their defensive coordinator to Brian Duker. Brian Duker was the pass game coordinator for the Miami Dolphins. He was the ninth interview. They interviewed him yesterday virtually for the first time. And of course, today he is hired as the DC. Worked under Aaron Glenn from 2021 to 2023. We'll talk about Aaron Glenn's involvement with this defense. And in those years combined, Brian Duker, in 2 years with the Dolphins had the 19th ranked and 22nd best interception rate and a 23rd best sack rate for the Dolphins. There's a lot to get into with this, and there is a lot to talk about. Again, this process the Jets have been going through just is wild and chaotic. Of course, the reports last night that they reached out to Jon Gruden, not to be the coach, but to be the OC, is just something. And people are going to ask, what are my thoughts on Brian Duker? And basically, this is my thought. I just think it's just basically what I expected. Someone that's going to come in, someone that's going to be the coordinator, and someone that is just going to basically be there as Aaron Glenn calls the plays. I'll get to my thoughts on Aaron Glenn play calling, but I do want to talk about Woody Johnson for a second because, again, his name, especially in the last 24 hours, has come up a lot. This process has come up, and here's where I'm coming to. And again, this isn't source. This is just basically me reading between the lines, reading off the actions of everything and how we got here. So if you recall, if we turn the clock back a couple days, Saturday it's reported Wink Martindale is coming in for basically a second in-person interview. He's going to be coming in, and it almost seems inevitable he's going to be this team's defensive coordinator. Then you get the rumblings that Frank Reich could potentially be the offensive coordinator, comes out Sunday. Then all of a sudden you don't hear about Wink, and it's kind of like, I wonder what's going to happen in that process. Then all of a sudden we hear about Tanner Engstrom getting demoted. He eventually gets fired. Now the Jets are interviewing offensive coordinator candidates to satisfy the Rooney Rule to get to Frank Reich. And now all of a sudden they pivot to Brian Duker, who, again, they interviewed 8 candidates, none of which came back for another interview. And basically they hire Brian Duker a day after they virtually interview him. So what does this mean? Reading between the lines, and there's a lot to read, I think Woody Johnson made a decision. And I know people are going to get upset with Woody, quote, meddling in this, but I actually want to defend briefly Woody Johnson in this decision in particular, because again, is he been a bad owner? Yes. Is he a major reason why the Jets are where they are? Absolutely. And it's at the point too where, and if you want to counter, well, why is he letting Aaron Glenn make all these decisions but not firing Aaron Glenn? I understand that too. Like, I get the frustration at this point. You can't really argue against getting rid of Aaron Glenn. But I think Woody looked at this situation and went, you get one. You get one, Aaron, because keep in mind with coordinators, most coordinators, especially unproven coordinators, get 2 guaranteed years of contracts. So in 2026, the Jets will be basically paying for Tanner Engstrom and for Steve Wilks to, quote, not be on this team and not be on the staff. When you look at coordinators like Frank Reich and Wink Martindale, they're not only going to cost more, but they're going to get more guaranteed years, which would be likely 3. And I think where Woody is, and again, people are going to say, well, he's a billionaire. It shouldn't matter about the money. Just keep throwing money at it. And again, I understand that argument. But I think he's sitting around going, wait a minute. I'm paying you, Aaron Glenn, $12 million a year, double what I was paying Robert Saleh. I let you pick the staff before. Now you're all of a sudden bringing in Wink Martindale to, quote, call your plays. And I think it's gone to the point where Woody goes, well, if I have to pay Wink Martindale this amount of money to call your plays, and now I have to also hire an offensive guy, it just doesn't make sense. And this to me is basically Woody Johnson throwing down the gauntlet and saying, all right, Aaron Glenn, you're a defensive coordinator. I hired you because of your defensive prowess. Let's see your defensive prowess, which, again, if history says is not good. When you look back at the Lions with Aaron Glenn calling the plays from 2021 to 2024, yards per game, they were 29th, 32nd, 23rd, and 20th in 2024. Points per game, 31st, 30th, 23rd, and the best was 24 at 7th. And basically, I think Woody Johnson's like, why am I paying you all this money if you're not going to run the defense? And this, to me, is basically they're just putting basically Aaron Glenn out there to call the defensive plays, because the whole time this process we've been going through is that they wanted someone to, quote, call the plays on defense, call the plays on defense. And now all of a sudden we get to this point where they want a head coach of the offense, and the defense is basically, okay, now we're going to give it to Aaron Glenn. And from principle, I get it with Woody Johnson. I think Woody Johnson, in the back of his mind, is looking ahead and going, I got to see if Aaron Glenn, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. And again, you can disagree with that. I'm going to let him coach next season. I'm going to see if it will work. But in the back of his mind, he's probably thinking, why am I going to shell out all this money for Wink Martindale and Frank Wright and Aaron Glenn when there's a good likelihood I'm going to be terminating them at the end of the next season? And now I'm not only going to be paying for a head coach for 3 seasons, but now 2 coordinators at the highest premium for 2 seasons where they're not even going to be coaching on my sideline. So Brian Zucker, again, worked for Aaron Glenn, was not one of the original interviewers. I just shrug at this point. It feels like they're going to end up with Frank Wright, and it feels like Aaron Glenn's going to call the plays. And if you're disappointed, if you're angry, if you're upset, look, I get it. I completely understand. Because when Aaron Glenn asked this fan base to trust him and trust the, quote, process, you look right now and you just go, what's this process? Because the whole process was, okay, we're going to find a new DC, but keep the offense and maybe bring in a veteran offensive staff to help our young offensive coordinator. And a month later, the Jets are looking for a new offensive coordinator. They're hiring an unproven defensive coordinator, and the head coach is going to be calling the plays, which wasn't in the original script. It's just one thing that you just keep scratching your head. And you look last year too, Aaron Glenn, when he brought over the staff, and I felt like one of the biggest mistakes was not bringing over more line players he coached and more lines defensive coordinators. And you look at Duker, again, I do think you look at this offseason, do they go all in on Alex Anzalone from the Lions and give him a massive contract? But it just feels like this ship, again, big ships turn slowly, is just absolutely rudderless right now. And again, do I like Duker? Because again, it's a young coach that could add maybe some new perspective to the staff. Sure, I'd rather have this than, to be honest, I'd rather have this than Wink Martindale, because I think the game's passed Wink Martindale by, and I think it's also passed Frank Wright by, but it seems like that's the route they want to go with. So Aaron Glenn, it's funny, he did not want to be calling plays. Now all of a sudden, he's going to be calling plays. I mean, this path we've gone to is just crazy. And let's be honest, it just feels like the Jets are just flying by the seat of the pants. Like there's no plan. You know, they took a shot at John Gruden the other day to be the offensive coordinator. And I tweeted this out on X. I said, if Aaron Glenn is that delusional that he thinks John Gruden would leave Barstool to be an offensive coordinator, you are out of your mind. John Gruden's not leaving for a head coaching job. And it also shows you, too, that no one's interested in John Gruden. Like the only team that gave him a shot, the Jets, and look, I do think John Gruden is going to be a name to keep an eye on. I do think this is basically we're interested maybe for 2027. But again, this just feels like we are just going downhill. And I've said this on this channel. The coordinator hire was really going to set the tone for this offseason. And boy, has it. Because if you were able to pull off a Jim Leonhard or someone that had some juice like him, then you could be like, okay, maybe Aaron Glenn does have connections. Maybe Aaron Glenn is actually viewed favorably in this league. But instead, it is bad. Like, you basically went through 8 candidates. Most have gotten hired. Some have basically told you that they're not coming back. Jim Leonard's likely going to be the DC now with the Bills, which is not great. And you look right here, like Aaron Glenn, like I agree with Woody Johnson at this point. A lot of the great coaches in this league call their side of the ball, especially on offense and defense. There's not going to be a disconnect. And last year, there was a clear disconnect between this defense and this head coach because they were completely on the same page. And I think it's also Woody Johnson throwing the gauntlet down saying, I hired you. I paid you a ton of money. You're supposed to be a great defensive mind. Let me see it. Because I'm not going to have you have the excuse of, well, it wasn't my fault. I'm not calling the plays. There's no scapegoats anymore. Last year, you got your get out of jail free card. It was it was Wilkes. Oh, it was Wilkes' fault. He was calling the plays. It wasn't my fault. Give him the old Shaggy defense. It wasn't me. And now all of a sudden, you basically go through 9 candidates, 3 of which have took jobs with other teams. One has stayed put. There was basically Wink Martindale, Bandit, Covington, and Harris. And that's the other thing. So what happened to Bandit, Covington, and Harris? Because clearly they were high on your list. You brought them in for the top 8 interviews. But instead of Banda, Covington, or Harris, you go with Duker, who wasn't even on the radar. He wasn't even on the radar. And I get he had the Detroit connection. But if you really love Duker, wouldn't he be one of the top 8 candidates? Like, that's why this fan base is so frustrated and so pissed off right now, because this process just feels absolutely broken. And look, I'm not trying to pile on Brian Duker, and I feel like there's going to be people that will do that. I will give him a fair shake. I want to see him succeed, obviously, and this isn't his fault. And the ire he will get from Jet fans today isn't directed at him. It's directed at the process to where we got. Like, think about this. The Jets went through a full month, and get this, they had a head start in the defensive coordinator position because they fired their defensive coordinator with 3 games left in the season. They had a month to do all these virtual interviews. Then they had a top 8. Then they had in-person interviews. Then they had Wink Martindale in their building to, quote, sign the paper. And now, days later, not only are they not going with one of their top 8 candidates, they basically are, hey, let's Zoom Brian Duker, who used to work on our staff. Now, maybe those other coordinators told Glenn, if we're not calling plays, we're not coming. And maybe Banda's the only one that said, yeah, Brian Duker, he's like, yeah, okay, you want to call the plays? That's fine. And look, if for Duker, he gets to basically be a DC and basically has a great shield, which is, well, Aaron Glenn's calling the plays. This process has just been an absolute mess. Let's get to the channel. Tyler, only Connecticut Jet fan like you. Look, it's even lower. Yeah, we got to do a Connecticut meetup for all the Jet fans to talk this over, Tyler. But again, Super Chat, jump to the front of the line. This is a goddamn joke. Who cares who they hired? They're all getting fired at the end of the next tank season. Woody has destroyed a beloved Jet legacy and killed this franchise. And look, it's going to be bad next year. It's going to be horrendous. And again, it is just so frustrating. And you look at Ulbrich, and again, I think Ulbrich was thrown into that. At least now Glenn has gotten a year of experience as, quote, a head coach. But you just look, this is going to be a bad season. Like, I've heard this comment a lot, and I think I was one of the first to say it, so I'll say it again. Jet fans just want to Madden this upcoming season. It's just like, can we just sim to 2027? Like, can we just wake up? Like, is there a machine, like a cryo machine we can freeze ourselves in October or in September and wake up when we get to January? It is just so toxic right now. And you just see people laughing at the Jets. And it's just like, we just want this franchise to be respectable and normal. Like, yesterday, it was a joke with the Tanner Engstrom stuff, and then you get the cherry on top, which is, oh, by the way, they reach out to John Gruden, like, to be the OC. It's like, can this team just be normal? Can they just operate as a normal franchise? It is just so frustrating right now. It is just so freaking it is just so mind numbing. And the one thing we keep hoping for is we get the number one pick. Like that's basically what we're all rooting for. And again, the problem that you're running into is the players you have here. Garrett Wilson might just say, you know what, this is just so toxic. Get me the hell out of here. Jermaine might say, yeah, I'm not going to sign a new contract here. Get me out of here. That's just the environment that has been created. It is just so toxic. And it's so toxic that it's making guys like Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh, who had horrendous careers here and were not good at their jobs, get opportunities in this league. It is incredible. And it is just so frustrating because I said this yesterday. It just feels like if you had a Jet fan run the day-to-day operations and just be normal and just take the layups, that the Jets would be a more functional organization. It's that not only do they act dysfunctional, but it's the way they do it and the way they just paint this fan base. Like, it's bad enough for this fan base that's going to have to sit here and watch the Patriots go to another Super Bowl. It's hard enough for this fan base to get the LOL Jets for the next 2 weeks with Sam Darnold now in the Super Bowl. But now you throw this in here where they're firing their offensive coordinator a month after the season. Instead of you're going to make that move, you do it right after the season. Because optically, it's horrendous. Because you're not going to get a great candidate regardless. But the fact that you're doing it when the cycle is pretty much over and the best people have moved on, it doesn't make any sense. And that is the biggest problem. And that's what is so maddening as a Jet fan is they just don't make sense. Like every decision they are making is horrendous. And you look at this too. I want to get to this as well because Aaron Glenn has opened this can of worms with the media. And this is the one thing I do not think coaches understand, especially in New York. I understand that coaches don't like to deal with the media. They don't like the media calling them out. They don't like the media, quote, picking on them. And look, Aaron Glenn, I guess the one thing that he is good at is he doesn't give a damn what I think, give a damn what the media thinks. He's going to wear a Teflon vest and not care what people say about him. And maybe that's the one way he'll survive this or get through this season. But the one thing I think that Aaron Glenn has very miscalculated, and this is a note to any future head coach, especially if you're going to be the head coach of the New York Jets. You have to understand the media is the media is basically your fan base. The media is the media to your fan base. When you talk to the media, you are addressing this fan base because we are not in the same room as you. We can't be in the same room as you, but we have questions. And as much as we might want to pick on the Rich Siminis, the Zach Rosenblatts, the Connor Hugheses of the world, they are very good at their jobs. And they also understand a lot of their questions, 90% they're direct at you, are questions that this fan base legitimately has. And when you tell this fan base that to basically kick rocks, I know what the hell I'm doing, I have a plan, you're wrong, and then you come out and you don't have any semblance of a plan. Like, Aaron Glenn, what was the plan this offseason? Because I guarantee you the plan wasn't to fire your offensive coordinator a month into the offseason. And this is the other thing. Like, this fan base is sitting here so frustrated with the process that this coach has gone through. And basically 95% is rooting for this coach to fail so they can get another head coach in here who has a semblance of a plan. Like, the plan for Aaron Glenn is like, oh, you got to trust me. I have a plan. What trust can we have in Aaron Glenn? There is no plan. The plan, 96 hours ago was to have Wink Martindale be the DC of this team. He's not going to be the defensive coordinator of this team. Like, there is no fundamental plan. And just telling the media and telling fans, hey, just jump along. Don't let go of the rope. We have a plan. Well, it sure doesn't feel like it. And now my biggest fear is you go into a draft with a staff that clearly is desperate, that clearly knows on the hot seat. Are they going to draft in this team's best interest? Are they going to draft a Ty Simpson at 16? Not because they think he's the best player there or because they think he's the savior of the quarterback, but they look at it and say, well, we have to draft the quarterback. He's our best option. And if we want to keep our job, we have to at least show that we have a young quarterback that can maybe play in this league. Like, it just feels like this team is operating out of desperation, and that never works out well. And you just look, the Jets are trying to build a staff. Like, I talked about this with Dom C. One of the advantages the Jets had for the draft this year was they didn't have to worry necessarily about hiring a whole new staff like last offseason. The Senior Bowl's going on in Mobile, and instead of being there on the ground, Aaron Glenn, in a year where his job's on the line, watching these prospects and trying to figure out who are the best players to help turn this team around, he's instead in meetings trying to find a defensive coordinator, now trying to fill out the whole defensive staff, trying to find an offensive coordinator, trying to find a quarterback coach, instead of focusing on finding players to help turn his damn team around. It is so freaking frustrating watching this team, and this process just drives you nuts. What's up, man? Again, I just wanted to take, again, super chat comments, jump to the front of the line. And again, like, you can tell, like, this fan base just from the comments, like, there's no people like saying, oh, I hate this hire. Oh, this is a terrible hire. It's like, whatever. And look, Brian Duker, nice guy, but you look at this process, the Jets spent a month trying to find a defensive coordinator. And basically they have a Zoom yesterday and they hire him 24 hours later. Like, this process just feels absolutely broken. Like, there's no plan. It's just like they are flying by the seat of their pants. And like I said earlier, I don't blame Woody Johnson for not wanting to shove out more money. And I understand people are going to be, well, you know, he's a billionaire. He can afford it. And I get that part of it. But I think it's more of a principle where he's sitting there saying, I'm paying Aaron Glenn $12 million a year. Aaron Glenn wants to hire Wink Martindale. It's probably going to cost $5 million a year instead of a normal coordinator in a 3-year contract. He also wants Frank Reich. I think he's going, enough, Aaron. I'm giving you an opportunity. And some people will then counter, well, shouldn't he be doing everything he possibly can to let Aaron Glenn succeed? And I understand that argument. But I think Woody's at the point now, he's like, I've given you an opportunity to come back and coach Steve. I've given you a chance to reset the staff. And if you're basically going to hire someone to call all the plays on defense when I've hired you as a defensive-minded head coach, why am I going to pay all that extra money? And I think Woody is of the opinion, too, like, I'm giving Aaron Glenn one shot this year. And if it doesn't work out, I don't want to be on the hook for paying Frank Reich $5 million a year for 3 years and also Wink Martindale. It's like, Aaron, what do you do here? Like, I'm paying you all this money for this defense. I'll let you hire a defensive coordinator, but I at least want to see you call the plays and, like, show me that you're competent at your job. It is just so frustrating right now. And it just feels like we are circling. It's just nonsense. It's just nonsense that this fan base has to put up with. It's like, it's not only that they are bad. It is just that the way they are conducting business and this process has just been utterly, utterly maddening. And like, again, I see the jokes. Oh, the Jets contacted Bill Parcells to be a candidate. It's just so frustrating to see that this staff, and again, there's always the counter arguments that, well, Glenn at least is understanding he made a mistake with the first-time hirings. Well, the process doesn't feel great where last year at the Combine and all offseason he was talking up how great the staff is, And then all of a sudden, 1 year later, oh, the staff is terrible. I got to get out of here. I got to get new people in here. It's like, and then the fact that the defensive coordinator, they spent a month looking at candidates, and there's still 3 of them on the board. And now the 9th candidate out of nowhere, it's like a Randy Orton RK out of nowhere, has a Zoom yesterday, and now today is hired as the DC. It just feels like this process is just broken. And it just feels like I said, if you put like if you put like a Connor Rogers or some Jet content creator in charge of the Jets, that they just would make logical decisions. Like they would just be at least practical. And it's, they went from basically hiring Wink Martindale to call defensive plays to 96 hours later, they're hiring a first-time defensive coordinator in Aaron Glenn. It just makes absolutely no sense what they're doing. Again, get to your comments, super chat to jump to the front of the line. Let's get to James. James, I think why everyone is mad is this. We almost didn't have Muji last year per SNY. Woody tried to lowball him, got denied, gave Newmark the same offer and failed, then went back to him. And again, Glenn did fight for Muji. That's the other point too, which is frustrating. Glenn and Sal relegating to staff philosophy is so stupid now. All the best head coaches call plays and lead the team famously pathetic. And look, Dan, bring up Saleh. That's one thing Saleh has said, that he regretted not calling the plays here, and he felt one of the reasons he failed as a Jets coach was he got out of the play calling. It took him a bit out of the game. And look, you can have people help call the plays, but the best coaches in this league are tacticians. And that's another thing that worries me about Aaron Glenn. Aaron Glenn, to me, was not a great tactician. When you look at his defenses, he only was a top 10 defense in points per game his last year in Detroit. Every other year, yards per game, they were over 20th, 23rd, 32nd, 29th. And then points per game, 23rd, 30th, and 31st. Like, that's not a good resume. I'm sorry, that's not a good resume. And until the Jets get a true leader, a true head coach, and the thing is, like, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. How many times has Woody Johnson gone down the first-time defensive coordinator route, and it hasn't worked? And you have to understand, you need great innovation in today's game. You need someone that's going to be an innovative play caller, and the Jets don't have that. Every game last year, it felt like this was a team that basically had no schematic advantage. And my holy king, like, that's the other thing. Like, and I get it's easy to pick at the carcass of the Jets. I get it. But the one thing that is mind-numbing to me is because the Jets and Aaron Glenn's been so pathetic this year, that all of a sudden the revisionist history about Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas is just maddening. And again, I get the Sam Darnold connection. Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas had Sam Darnold, and they decided, we want Zach Wilson. And like I said yesterday, if Joe Douglas is getting these interviews and the first two questions out of your mouth isn't, why did you keep Sam Darnold and why did you pick Zach Wilson? And the second question, another question, how did you think JSN wasn't a better player than Will McDonald? Just saying. Look, here's my opinions on Frank Reich. I think Frank Reich, if this was 5-6 years ago, I'd be more excited. I feel the game has passed him a bit by. It almost feels like this is his last chance to kind of get a check from the NFL. I just feel like the game's passed by. The one thing with him that I do like is I do think playing the quarterback position, I do think he can relate to a young quarterback. But you see it right now. The best offensive coaches are highly innovative, and Frank Reich, it feels like, hasn't been successful in that. And even with Wink Martindale, like, the thing with Wink is, and this is the odd thing with this search, which is also maddening, like, the two guys that want the job really are guys that are past their prime and just want to get back into the National Football League. It's not like people are looking at the Jets job saying, I want to coach the Jets. It's, I want an opportunity to get back in the NFL. Like, look, college football with the NIL is just crazy. And I think you see Wink want to get out of that world. I think you want to see Frank Reich getting out of that world. And, like, let's be honest, it's more of them wanting the Jets and basically getting a big check from the Jets than, I want to come to the Jets because they have this great coach. Or I want to come to the Jets because they have this great young talent. Like, they don't have a quarterback. They seemingly don't have the head coach. And that's what's so depressing right now. And part of the wake-up call, I think, for Woody is going to be that this team is going to get buried in the scheduling. Like, I will not be surprised if Woody wants the London game and the NFL tells him, sorry, Woody, we can't do it. The team's so bad. We're not going to put them in London. We're not going to put a product on the field that is so horrendous. Like, I think the Jets will get one, like, Thursday night football game. That's going to be it. And I think that's going to piss off Woody. And the other thing, too, is you're going to see the Giants, I think, have success this first year. And that's just going to piss off Woody. And finally, hopefully, the light bulb goes off in his head. Yeah, I need to get someone that's either a brilliant offensive coach or coordinator like Kubiak, or I need to get a legitimate head coach that's had the experience. Like, those are the two options, really. And again, it's just like we're talking here today. Like, think about this. This is the end of January. We're not talking about the 2026 season, which is in 8 months. We're talking about a year from now, future head coaches, all the draft capital, hopefully having the number 1 or 2 pick in the draft. Like, we're not talking as Jet content creators. We're not talking about the here and now. We're not talking about next season. We're talking a full season ahead. A full season ahead, which is, when you really think about it, it's just so depressing. The fact that we are in this position. And again, this Jet fans don't deserve this. Riker Wink would essentially be Greg Williams 2.0. Thanks. Here's the thing, though, Dan. Greg Williams, when he was here, he was damn good at his job. To me, the defense wasn't the issue. It was basically that this offense was inept, and Greg Williams at least was creative. Like, one of the things that I've talked about with the draft, again, we're going to have so much draft content on this channel. Make sure to like, subscribe. One of the reasons I paused with Arvell Reese at the top of the draft is Arvell Reese, to me, again, is a linebacker that you have to move all over the field in certain situations. And I compared him to Jamal Adams, where Greg Williams used Jamal Adams in the best way he could use Jamal Adams, which is he understood that Jamal Adams his strength wasn't coverage, but it was playing in the box. It was coming off the edge. It was being a hybrid linebacker safety that could disrupt in the pass game, could rush the passer, and he would move him all around the field to put him in the best spots. That, to me, is Arvell Reese. You can't just stick him at defensive end or set the edge. You have to move him around the board, and I just don't think that what I've seen on Aaron Glenn's history and now at this DC hiring, I just don't think that they are going to be a creative defense. Would you say the only way AG can keep his job if the Jets make the playoffs next season? I think that there are only realistically 2 paths. And again, this team's not making the playoffs. Look at their schedule. Where defense vastly is improved and this team is like a 6 or 7 win team, but playing well and are in games where you're like, okay, the Jets had no business being in that game. And this is why I'm concerned also going into this draft, my holy king, which is, do the Jets get desperate and overdraft Ty Simpson? Because the way that they can try to keep their jobs is they're terrible. They put Ty Simpson in, and Simpson looks good the second half of the season. The Jets are like, let's say, a 3 and 4 win team, but Aaron Glenn can go to Woody Johnson, say, hey, I found your quarterback. He looks really good. We've put him in a good situation. Now we have all these picks that we can build around this quarterback. Like, that to me is the only other option, which also terrifies me, because I think Ty Simpson is an intriguing prospect. If the Jets took him like at 33rd or 44th, that's where I want. But 16, like, they just need good football players, and I'm just not sure of overdrafting Ty Simpson. And basically, imagine this scenario. You draft Ty Simpson, he doesn't work, and then you're going to next year's draft. Great, you get the number 1 pick. You have all those first-round picks, but you burned a valuable first-round pick this year on a guy who's not going to be a part of your future, which makes absolutely no sense. It absolutely is with no sense. With Greg Williams, I'm speaking of leadership dysfunction. Yeah, like it – I just think Wink would not have worked here. And to me, Wink, the games passing by, I watched him when he played USC with Lincoln Riley, and they just decimate him. And look, I think that there's a reason Wink, again, these are candidates. Like, you don't hear other teams calling Frank Reich. You don't hear any of the other 31 teams calling Wink Martindale. So with Ty Simpson, I think he's a project. I view him as a second-round grade on my board right now. I think he needed more experience in college. The mechanics do concern me, the accuracy. I do think when he's on, he's a very good player. But he's a guy that needs to be developed and a guy that needs to sit. And just with this staff and just with the Jets' predicament, I think that they're going to rush him out there much like Dante Moore. I feel like they're going to throw the kid out there before he's ready to just, quote, try to save their jobs, which, again, is not really I don't think it's a great situation. And again, like, we should be talking about the Senior Bowl right now. We should be talking about, like, the players that are there, but instead we're talking about this. It's, and another, another interesting thing too, is now that Jim Schwartz, they hired Todd Monken in Cleveland. Now, of course, now Schwartz wants out, even though he's under contract. So again, it's a battle for dysfunction between the Jets and the Browns. It's just crazy. And again, like, we should be talking about, like, TJ Parker, Zion Young, Kyle Lewis, but instead we're talking about this. And it's just so crazy, but it's frustrating that we're here at this point, and that basically we're already thinking about Arch Manning in 2027. We're thinking about who can be the next head coach, and basically the joke is we want to see him next season. And again, you're right. It's it is frustrating, like, that basically this team just doesn't feel like it has direction. It doesn't feel like this team has any sort of direction. And that's what's really frustrating. And it just feels like right now they're going to overpay Alex Anzalone in free agency. They're going to give him a ton of money. But, this team, like, a year ago, Aaron Glenn came in saying he had a plan. He was going to build a staff around him. And that was one of the selling points that the 33rd team tried to tell us all was, oh, he's going to be a great staff builder. People want to work for him. He's got great connections. And you look right now, it's basically he doesn't have those connections. Again, comments, super chat to the front of the line. Once again, if you're just joining us, the Jets have hired Brian Duker, who was the former pass game coordinator for the Miami Dolphins. Before that, he did work with Aaron Glenn in Detroit over the last 2 seasons in Miami. Under his watch, Dolphins had the 19th ranked pass defense, 22nd best interception rate, and 23rd best sack rate. And again, it's clear Aaron Glenn's going to be calling plays, which, again, going down with the ship. But again, Aaron Glenn was not a great play caller. You look at his history in Detroit, his defenses were not great. Yards per game, he was never under 20th in the league. It was 20th, 23rd, 32nd, and 29th in points per game. His last year was his best at 7, but before that, 23rd, 30th, and 31st. So, and look, it's Brian Duker is a legend. They call him the Duke of Waffle House. That's a good one. I have to give you that one. Boycott Activision. And again, we're just here spinning cycle. We're going to wait for Frank Wright. Frank Wright, is going to be now. And of course, now Jim Schwartz might be available, which, again, I would have loved, but I don't think he's even coming here to the Jets. But I mean, I also think the Jets are tipping their hand a little bit. I think Woody Johnson has shown you that he's interested in John Gruden, at least to interview next year. Again, the thing with this, the Jets are just so being down. Like, you just want anything. You're just trying to basically have any opportunity to basically have some hope, because right now you just don't. You don't have any hope right now, and it's so frustrating. And look, the history of the NFL is pretty clear. I mean, you look at the only other team to have a losing record and fire both their offensive coordinators and defense coordinators was the 1-15 Browns. And what happened to them? The next year, they went 0-16. It's not a great place to be in right now. And look, Frank Wright, it's clear the Jets are going to bring him in. He's going to run the offense. It's clear that Aaron Glenn's going to run the defense. And it just feels like the inevitable that this isn't going to work. It just feels like we are just waiting until 2027. I think the biggest hope that Jet fans have is they don't screw up this draft. They're able to add some talent. But right now, it's just this is as toxic as I've seen it with this fan base in my life. Because at least I can go back and say with the second year of Gase, at least there was some plan with Sam Darnold. It was trying to build around him. Like the Jets right now don't have anything. They don't have a young quarterback you're excited or interested in seeing. They don't have a head coach that you believe in. You're hoping Darren Muji is maybe this all-star general manager, but we have to see it because last year, again, he had a good first 2 days of the draft, but day 3 left a lot to be desired. So it's, and again, I get why they did this. They hired someone that's been on his staff for 3 years. They hire someone that has the experience, but again, it's just kind of a sigh. And you just look at this whole process, like their top 8 candidates, 3 of them are still out there. 3 of them are still available. And unfortunately, they go with the guy that they basically had a virtual interview with the other day, and now he's going to be the Jets defensive coordinator. It is just so frustrating. And, maybe they just need to bring someone back with some gravitas. I mean, Demario Davis is possibly going to be hitting free agency again. I know he's an older player, but just that leadership and just someone to come full circle, finish his career with the Jets. It's just, if that might be something to do. They just need to get players that have some respect here. And you look, the defensive coordinator they're bringing in, he's a 9 seasons as a defensive assistant. This is the biggest role he's going to have. And basically, it's clear that Aaron Glenn's going to call the plays. Basically, Aaron Glenn are going to be calling the plays, and it's, and it's frustrating. Like the thing with the Engstrom yesterday, it was basically Engstrom probably asked to be fired. He basically probably asked, hey, I'm not going to be sitting here not doing anything and go asked to sit in the corner. Like, I'll go somewhere else. I guarantee you he's going to get a job somewhere else. And this whole thing too now where all of a sudden Aaron Glenn was telling people he wants to call the plays. I don't know where that's come from. And here's my thing. If it really is true that Aaron Glenn was considering calling plays all the time, then why are you reaching out to Wayne Martindale? Like he was going to be someone that only would come here if he's calling the plays. And that's one of the reasons it fell apart. And I get that Tanner Engstrom wasn't necessarily a great offensive coordinator, but look at what Aaron Glenn and the staff gave him. He had no number 1 receiver for the second half of the season. His top 2 receivers in the second half were on the opening a roster. He had a rookie tight end. He didn't have a quarterback. In most of the games, he had Justin Fields and Brady Cook. Give that even to like Sean McVay or give that to Kevin O'Connell. Like they would do better, but are they winning 5-6 games with that combination? I don't think so. And again, this is the staff that Aaron Glenn, once again, Aaron Glenn all last offseason was puffing out his chest. And what was the thing he kept saying? Oh, I've built this great staff. We're going to coach these guys up. We have a great coaching staff. And even unprovoked last year, he took shots at Robert Saleh, the former regime. Yeah, Will McDonald, we're going to coach him up. He's going to be even better under us. And every single player, especially defensively, regressed and played worse. And it also was alarming too because Aaron Glenn had times last year where he could have helped people out, and instead he let them drown. Steve Wilks was drowning as a defensive coordinator. And basically, Aaron Glenn said, you know what, you're going to go down the ship and you're going to be my sacrificial lamb. And then even the last 3 weeks of the season, he puts a first-time defensive coordinator out there and doesn't say, I'll call the plays to take it off him. No, I'll help with the play calling, but he's going to call the plays. How'd that turn out? And then all of a sudden, this offensive coach who you were beaming about and bragging, it's not all Ben Johnson's work. Like, this guy knows what he's doing. You were bragging to everyone about him, and then you fire him not only after 1 season, but a month into the offseason. None of this makes any sense, and that is what's maddening about this team because every single time we don't think it can get crazier. We don't think that the Jets can do something even more chaotic that we haven't seen before. The Jets basically say, hold our beer. We're going to show you something crazy. I just hate the process. Like, I just want someone to basically have a decent process, a normal process. And instead, we find ourselves once again in this circle that just never seems to end. And we never can seem to get the right guy in here. It's just so frustrating. And again, as Jet fans, I understand the frustration. And once again, we'll have a lot to talk about this offseason. We'll go through free agency, we'll go through the draft. But it just feels like we just want to get to 2027, which as a fan base is not good. So again, the Jets have Brian Duker. He's their new defensive coordinator. Aaron Glenn will call the plays, and it's seeming that Frank Reich will be the offensive coordinator for this team. And basically, I don't know what else to say. Like at this point, I just don't know what else to say. This team, just this process is broken. I think that Aaron Glenn is well over his skis. And it just feels like we're just waiting for the inevitable to happen, which is Aaron Glenn gets replaced as the head coach of this team. But the Jets have their new DC. Aaron Glenn will call plays, which again, to me, is also alarming. It looks like the Jets will have their offensive coordinator in the short term. But once again, the Jets are just chaos and have just kicked off a chaotic offseason. But again, we'll be along with the whole ride. This roller coaster doesn't stop on this channel. Again, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss any of the latest Jets news and content. We'll have plenty of mock draft content around the Senior Bowl coming out. So all this great NFL draft content coming down the pike. So make sure you don't miss any of that. But until next time, I'm your host, Nolan Rich, and this has been Rich Sports Talk. We'll see you next time.